They laughed at me before I even said my name. I still remember that sound, not loud at first, just a few chuckles, the kind people make when they think they're being polite about their disbelief. And then it spread, rolling through the room until it became something heavier, something sharp. I was 12 years old, standing in a university hall that smelled like polished wood and expensive cologne, holding a backpack that still had a superhero keychain on it, while a man in a tailored suit looked down at me and said, "Kid, you're in the wrong place." That was the moment everything started. I wasn't supposed to be there, not in their eyes. I grew up in a neighborhood where schools had metal detectors, not trophies, where the library was the safest place to sit quietly and think. Math was never something I planned to love, it just happened. Numbers made sense when people didn't. They didn't care how old I was, what I looked like, or where I came from. They either worked or they didn't, and if they didn't, that meant there was a reason. While other kids were worried about video games and lunch money, I was spending afternoons buried in dusty library books chasing a problem most people had never even heard of. It was an old academic argument, something professors fought over for years without an answer. To me, it wasn't intimidating, it was annoying. Grown adults arguing in circles instead of figuring it out. I didn't get that, so I tried to solve it myself. Fast forward to that hall. The competition was supposed to be for high school students, juniors, and seniors, mostly kids with tutors and coaches and parents who knew how to speak confidently to professors. I got there with my aunt who raised me after my mom passed and my cousin Malik who acted tough but kept checking if I was okay. People stared like I was lost. One woman whispered, "Is he someone's kid?" The man at the registration desk finally looked at my papers, frowned, and said, my school's name out loud like it tasted bad. "You qualified?" he asked. I nodded. "Top score," I said. That's when he laughed. Not a friendly laugh, a dismissive one. He picked up my notebook when it slipped out of my bag, flipped through the pages, then held it up so people could see the scribbles. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "this child thinks he's here to compete. He even believes he can solve a problem that professionals have debated for decades." The room exploded. I stood there feeling heat rush up my face, but something strange happened. I wasn't embarrassed anymore. I was calm, almost curious. Curious about how sure they were that I couldn't do what I'd already spent years trying to understand. Someone shouted from the crowd, "Hey kid, if you're so smart, who's right?" I looked at the man behind the desk, the one leading the laughter. "You are," I said, "and I can prove it." More laughter. Louder this time, but I didn't care, not anymore. The first round was simple. Multiple choice, speed-based. I finished early and sat there watching teenagers squirm, checking the clock, erasing answers. When the scores came back, my name was at the top. Perfect score. The laughter faded into murmurs. The man at the desk stopped smiling. Round 2 was different. Proof-based problems. We had to go up to the board and explain our thinking. Someone dragged a chair over so I could reach the chalkboard. People laughed again, but it was nervous now. I started writing, laying out my method, not the one in textbooks, but the one that made sense to me. Halfway through, the man interrupted. "Stop," he said. "That's not the standard approach." I turned around, standing on the chair, still looking up at him. "I know," I said, "but it finds something your method misses." A woman in the front row leaned forward, studied the board, and nodded slowly. "He's right," she said. "There's a constraint here no one accounts for." The room went quiet. That moment changed everything. Someone recorded it. By the time I got home, the clip was everywhere. Millions of views. People arguing in the comments, some cheering, some calling it fake, some saying I was being used. The man from the registration desk watched it too, over and over, and I know that because he changed the rules for the final round. The night before the finals, I was on the floor of our apartment, papers spread everywhere, rechecking my work. My aunt brought me food and asked why I looked so serious. I told her they'd probably try to embarrass me. She asked if I was scared. I told her yes. She smiled and said, "Being scared just means you care about doing it right." Finals day felt unreal. Cameras everywhere, bright lights, 7 teenagers in matching jackets and 1 kid in worn sneakers. When the problem appeared on the screen, the audience gasped. It was the same old unsolved problem, the one I'd been working on quietly for years. The man at the podium smiled like he'd already won. Halfway through the time limit, I hit a wall. I saw something in my proof that didn't sit right. My stomach dropped. The chat online went wild, people saying I was done, that this was too much for a kid. The man leaned forward, satisfied. I closed my notebook for a second, took a breath, and remembered why I started. Not to win, not to prove anyone wrong, just to find the truth. When I looked again, I realized the problem wasn't broken. It was incomplete. The missing piece wasn't an error, it was the key. When time was called, everyone else admitted they couldn't solve it, one by one. Then it was my turn. I climbed onto the chair, picked up the chalk, and explained everything. Slowly, clearly. No tricks, just logic. The silence afterward felt endless. Then one professor nodded. Another checked my work. The woman from before smiled. The argument that had lasted decades was over. The man who laughed at me stood there pale, staring at the board. Later, when it came out that he'd changed the problem to make me fail, the story flipped completely. Cameras caught him shaking my hand. I asked him why he laughed at me. He didn't answer. I told him he was right about the math, but wrong about me, and that I forgave him. Walking out that building, my cousin slapped my shoulder and said, "You know you just changed everything, right?" I laughed. "I just did the math." I said, "And that's the part I want you to think about. How many times do we laugh first and listen later? How many people do we decide are wrong before they even speak? If you've ever been underestimated, dismissed, or told you don't belong, this story isn't about me. It's about you. So tell me what you think. Was I right to forgive him? Was he wrong from the start, or just blind? Drop your thoughts below, argue with me if you want, and share a moment where someone doubted you. Because those stories matter more than people think.